The Raiders and Raider Nation continue to search for answers to what went wrong in Denver on Sunday. That plus more on Tuesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for October 8th, 2024.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available. And as always, if you're checking us out on YouTube, you know we appreciate that. The show continues to grow each and every day. Well over 16,000 subscribers for the podcast. We appreciate you, Raider Nation, for that. And, of course, we appreciate my man Ari, who does a great job each and every day making sure that we're on YouTube and we're looking good and we're sounding good. And he has made it his personal mission to make sure that the YouTube page is on point. So big shout out to my man Ari. He does a fantastic job. Check him out on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can hit me up as well at your boy Q254. And you know, anytime you want to be a part of the show, we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line at 707-654-4693. And imagine that we get a lot of calls and texts, so we can't get every single one of them on. I try to get in as many as possible. I try to get a variety of calls and texts on, but do appreciate any time that you chime in by way of the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. So thank you so much for that. Your calls and texts will come up in segment number 3. As you can imagine, we got a ton of feedback. We'll get as many in as possible. Segment number 3. Segment number 2, we'll continue to look at the Raiders, what they did on Sunday, what they could do moving forward, what they can do with the quarterback position, what a former Raider wide receiver noticed in the game on Sunday as well. Just talk about the Raiders as they continue to put the pieces together and get prepared for an upcoming game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, a team that's got a very good defense coming up this Sunday at Allegiant Stadium. But we'll still look back at the Denver Broncos game, Week 5 action as well. That'll be in segment number 2. Here is segment number 1, news and notes of the day, including the latest and the greatest when it comes to Davante Adams and a potential trade. We'll get into that after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. We'll tell you a lot about them later on in the show, but let's go ahead and jump into it as promised. News and notes, and let's start with the positive. Before we get into anything negative, before we get into anything Davante Adams related, let's get to the positive. And the positive is rookie Brock Bowers, number 13 overall pick in this last year's draft. He's been fantastic. He's been as advertised. I mentioned that on Monday's show. Obviously, we saw the big touchdown that he had, the nice catch and run that he had, his first career touchdown, first of many, I can imagine. He's been fantastic so far in a limited amount of time. 5 games so far, 35 targets. This is according to Pro Football Focus, Fantasy, and Betting. Brock Bowers amongst tight ends this season. 35 targets, that's number 1. 28 catches, that's number 1. 313 yards, that's 1. That's number 1 right there. And everyone knows I'm not a fantasy football player. I don't do any of that, but I know there's a ton of folks out there that are fantasy football players. I respect that. I know it's a fun thing to do for a lot of folks. I just don't have the time for it, so I don't do it. But I do, like I said, know that a lot of folks do. So if you're playing in a PPR league, he has 66.5 total PPR points that he's provided. That also is first, again, amongst tight ends in the league. Not rookie tight ends in the league. So Brock Bowers is as advertised. He's doing the very best he can with what he's given to work with, and I could imagine that he's only going to get better and better and better. So I did want to pass along that. Again, just looking for some positivity, and Brock Bowers, the number 13 overall pick in this past April's draft, is definitely positivity for the Silver and Black. Now, of course, everyone wants to know the latest in the Davante Adams. Is not a subject that I'm going to hit every single day on the show, especially when there's no new updates. But when you hear Adam Schefter on the Pat McAfee show kind of explain where he is or where he's hearing, what he's hearing about Davante Adams, what he thinks is going to go on with the star wide receiver and where he ends up at, it's worth attention. So he was on the Pat McAfee show on Monday, as he is each and every week. And this is what he had to say, the latest and the greatest when it came to Davante Adams and with the potential landing spots for the star wide receiver.
In the end, ultimately, I still think Davante wants to go play for the Jets or the Saints. And I think ultimately in the end, the Raiders figure out a way to work it out with the Jets or the Saints. It's been those two teams. I think it will consistently be those two teams. That doesn't preclude a team like the Bills or the Steelers or the Ravens from monitoring the situation just to see what else could happen. But you're going to need Davante Adams' cooperation if you're trading a second-round pick to that team to restructure his contract. he's going to want to have to be willing. So even though he doesn't have a no trade, he does have influence in this particular situation in the form of restructuring his contract for next year and beyond, because he's due like $36.25 million next year, non-guaranteed. There's not going to be a team out there next year that wants to pay Davante Adams $36.25 million non-guaranteed and carry him on that roster. So either you have to redo it with his help and cooperation, or you have to move on from him. So if you're going to give up, let's just call it a second-round pick, because the Raiders have been adamant that they get a 2, you're going to want some kind of assurance from Davante that he's going to be there beyond this year. And he's certainly going to be more apt to give that to an organization that he wants to be playing for and a quarterback that he knows well. And the 2 quarterbacks he knows well and wants to play with most of all are Aaron Rodgers and Derek Carr.
So there you go. You hear Adam Schefter talking about, he has a little bit. He doesn't have the no trade clause, but he has influence on what he can do. And a lot of it has to do with the contract. A lot of folks hit me up when this whole Davante Adams situation started to shake out and said, well, you got to get a 1 for him. And I said, you're not going to get a 1 for him, right? The Raiders gave up a 1 and a 2. And once you drive that car off the lot, the value goes down. Nobody's giving up a 1 for a 31-year-old wide receiver that's going to turn 32 in December. And, oh, by the way, has the salary that he currently has, not to mention going to have to do something with his contract and give him some guaranteed money. So there's a lot that whoever picks him up, whoever decides to trade for him, is going to have to do once they get him. And the Raiders want a 2, right? And so it could come down to the Raiders might have to eat some of his salary as well. There's a potential that they might have to eat as much as like $13 million, to turn that number 3 over, round pick, 3rd round pick into a 2nd round pick. And it might be worth it, right? That's a decision that Tom Telesco and company needs to decide. They have to decide how quickly they want to get this done. It feels like it's going to get wrapped up pretty quickly. It feels like it's going to be the Jets or the Saints at the end of the day. Obviously, both teams have familiarity with them. The Jets, Aaron Rodgers and Nathaniel Hackett, who's there as the offensive coordinator, and in New Orleans, Derek Carr, the quarterback. Also, there's plenty of former Raiders on the Saints, and not to mention Dave Ziegler, who is also an assistant in the front office there. He's the one who traded for Davante Adams when he was the Raiders GM, when he traded with the Packers. So he knows a lot of the ins and outs, and he knows what he'd have to do for Davante Adams. So I definitely would not rule the Saints out as a real deal landing spot. Probably more, if I just went off my gut feeling, I'd probably tell you that the Jets are second in line as far as Davante Adams go. I think that there's a better chance that he ends up in New Orleans than with the Jets, but the minute I say that is when there'll be breaking news, and Shefty will say, Aaron Rodgers and the Jets have just acquired Davante Adams, right? Just because I just said that. But there it is. That's the latest and the greatest when it comes to Davante Adams. Like I said, I won't update this every single day unless there's something to update. So just wanted you to hear what Shefty had to say on that situation. And speaking of the Pat McAfee show, and we'll close out segment number 1 with this. Max Crosby in the Raiders locker room on Sunday. He had some pretty powerful words. If you remember last week, Michael Lombardi, former NFL GM, was part of the Raiders front office for a quick minute, had some pretty tough words to say when it came to the Davante Adams situation, and also the fact that during the Cleveland Browns game, the game that Max Crosby missed, he wasn't on the sideline. Now, remember, he's dealing with a high ankle sprain. We talked about it on this show. I didn't see anything into it. I was looking for him on the sideline, then realized he wasn't there, and thought, well, the team probably told him to be at home and rest and try to rehab, and that's exactly what they did. That was brought to the light later on. Well, Max Crosby spoke on Michael Lombardi, talking about him on the Pat McAfee show and saying something's not right in that Raiders locker room if Max Crosby's not on the sideline. Love Max Crosby's response here. Check it out.
And then I got to hear these, clowns that talking online and talking on the Pat McAfee show saying, something's going on, and they're speaking for me, saying I should be on the sideline when I got a high ankle sprain. You know what I mean? And these clowns they're sitting on the couch talking about what I should be doing. But the reality is I'm gaining yardage and trying to get right, and so I can get back on the field. Everybody knows my intentions, and they try to speak for me. When if you speak to me and you know what's going on, then we could have a conversation, but don't speak on my name. You know what I mean? When you don't know what the hell is going on. I'm there. These guys know I'll take a bullet for them, everyone in this locker room. So when you got clowns that are online and talking on, they got their one day of the week where they get to go on the Pat McAfee show and talk, talking about what we should do, and you haven't even been a GM. You're a GM for 1 year, so it's embarrassing. You know what I mean? Don't speak for me. I'm gonna speak for my guys, and that's all I care about. So I really, I get bothered by that because I take a lot of heat, and I could do it. You know what I mean? I've been through that, but don't speak about me when you don't know what's going on. You're speaking for me. You know what I mean? Or speaking about the organization. Oh, something must be going on with Matt. Come on, bro. You know where I want to be. You think I want to be anywhere else? No. I got the tatted on my body. I don't want to go anywhere. So at the end of the day, it's just funny. You got a lot of people that have a lot to say when they really don't know what's going on.
Thought that was awesome. Thought that was a great response from Max Crosby. It's refreshing, no matter how much drama is going on, to hear Max Crosby, say, is there anywhere else I want to be? No, right? I got this tatted on me. I don't want to go anywhere. Him wanting to be a Raider, it really is refreshing, knowing all the drama that he's been through since he's been with the team, all the ups and downs that he's seen, more downs than ups, right? Just all the different situations that have occurred since he's been in the National Football League and a member of the Raiders, and still for him just to really, double and triple down how much he wants to be a Raider. I think, to me, that's really refreshing. So definitely wanted to pass that along. And not a shot at Pat McAfee, but a shot at Michael Lombardi, a guest on the Pat McAfee Show once a week. So that's what I got for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. On Monday, I talked about what the Raiders should do at the quarterback position if Antonio Pierce was going to make a call on who the quarterback moving forward was going to be. Was it going to be Minshew or O'Connell? He did not, but we'll talk about it a little bit more coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about a couple great sponsors here of the show, including FanDuel. And, well, you can jump into this season on FanDuel right now. I know that Week 5 is already officially in the books. It's on to Week 6, but it's never too late. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, whatever the case may be, if you think that a game is trending in one direction for one team or trending in another direction, or you think a big play is about to happen, or maybe a team's going to come out of the locker room in the third quarter and all of a sudden go down the field and score a touchdown and things are going to change for them, well, you can go and place your bets mid-game. You can get on FanDuel.com. You can check out the latest stats. You can check out play-by-play, and you can do so much on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. All you got to do is go to FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. I also want to tell you about our good friends at Hillsdale College. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How could you spend it wisely to improve yourself? History, economics, the great works of literature, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution. Did you study these things in school? Probably not. Or if you did, maybe you're like me, you need a refresher because you didn't study it very well. Well, time and technology have changed a lot of things, but they have not changed basic fundamental truths about the world and our place in it. So they've got all kind of different courses available at Hillsdale College. Constitution 101, Introduction to the Free Market Economics, The Great American Story, A Land of Hope, The Rise and Fall of Roman Republic, and a brand new documentary-style course of socialism and communism, Marxism. They got it all covered there at Hillsdale College. All the Hillsdale courses are self-paced so that you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Right now, all you got to do is go to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. Again, one more time for the folks in the back row. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to just jump into the team in general. Really, in segment number 1, talked about more of the Davante Adams stuff. Heard a little bit of refreshing sound from Max Crosby on the state of the team, him being with the team. But now I just want to talk about where the team is right now after 5 weeks, sitting there at 2-3. Obviously, a very winnable game that they had in Denver on Sunday, a game that they looked like they had all momentum, trending in the right direction, and then boom, all of a sudden it was gone. And once it was gone after that pick 6, they never found a way to get it back. So, of course, we've been spending a lot of time talking about, well, are there going to be some decisions made? Is the team going to go in a different direction? Are they going to have a different quarterback? Well, on Monday, I was not at the press conference for Antonio Pierce. I was on the ESPN radio doing Carlin versus Joe, filling in for Chris Carlin. And AP did not make a decision. AP said that they're still studying and evaluating the film. As a matter of fact, Adam Schefter said Raiders head coach Antonio Pierce told reporters he's still evaluating who will be the starting quarterback, Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell. For now, the team is treating it like a competition before deciding who will start versus Steelers. So that's kind of just where they are right now. But We know that they went into the game with a strong game plan. It is not one that I looked at and said, okay, this team was not prepared. They were not ready to go, because they came out of the locker room full throttle, hair on fire, right? They were playing great, both sides of the ball, offense, defensively. Hell, special teams was playing well. And then all of a sudden, the air just was let out of their sails, and they never were able to recover it. Well, I have every Monday and Friday on my radio show, former Raider wide receiver Ryan Hogue. He was drafted Mr. Irrelevant back in 2003. Mr. Irrelevant is the very last pick in the draft. So in 2003, the Raiders selected Ryan Hogue, wide receiver, as Mr. Irrelevant. Had him on the squad for a little while. He was a journeyman and went around the league for a little while. But he joins my radio show every Monday and Friday, and it's always great to, on Mondays, get a review of what just happened, the game that happened, and then a preview of the upcoming game on Friday. Well, on Monday, he was talking, and I asked him the straight-up question about Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell. He still thinks Gardner Minshew gives the team the best opportunity to win. He, as a matter of fact, went as far as say that he thought if Aiden O'Connell was a starting quarterback, they might only win 2 more games. He just didn't see a recipe for success because the offensive line is not where it needs to be. The Raiders' failures, their 3 losses that they've had this season, is not 100% on Gardner Minshew either. There's a lot of elements that go into that. He's not wrong about any of that, right? I'll be the first to say that I don't think Gardner Minshew is the sole problem for the Raiders' struggles. I just know, and the reason why I was saying that Aiden O'Connell should be the way to go, at least for the next 4 games, to see what he's got, is just because there's still so much season left in the year, right? So many games left in the season. They've only played 5, so they got 12 games guaranteed, right? Whatever they earn after that is even better, but they've got 12 more games guaranteed. And so just like when Mark Davis made the decision to move on from Josh McDaniels and put Antonio Pierce in the position to be the interim head coach, I thought, okay, if AP decides, and he still might, we'll meet with him again on Wednesday at the Intermountain Health Performance Center, and he might say after evaluation, Aiden O'Connell is the guy. But I'm just giving you Ryan Hogue's thoughts on what he thinks, and the fact that he thinks that Gardner Minshew still gives them the best opportunity to win these games, and why it's not all 100% on him. Not to mention, he said that, Luke Getsy has been putting this game plan together and trying to put an offense, tailor it around who Gardner Minshew is. And Aiden O'Connell clearly is a different quarterback. So all of a sudden, Luke Getsy would have to redo what he's been working on the past, month and a half, ever since Gardner Minshew has been named the starting quarterback. Well, my counter to that is, well, what he's done hasn't looked that great anyway, right? So maybe it's not a bad thing if he does scrap that game plan and get another one, but how long will it take to establish that? So I get that. But then he hit me back. He sent me a text that I thought was pretty cool, and I wanted to pass that along. He said, one thing I forgot to bring up, and again, this is Ryan Hogue, former Raider wide receiver speaking. One thing I forgot to bring up, when we got down, and when he says we, you're talking about the Raiders, guys started to do things out of character. They were trying to do too much. Spillane, Merrick, instead of doing their jobs. When you're frustrated, you can't make it up with one hero play. Kills the other 10 guys that are doing their jobs. I hadn't seen that until yesterday. Again, Ryan Hogue, former Raiders wide receiver, passed that note along by way of text to me. And that really hit me because, again, you did see, Spillane with some missed tackles. You did see Merrick look like he was out of place at times. Even Isaiah Palomaro didn't really look like he had the game that I expected him to have. He's this guy that I say all the time is just around the ball, and it just didn't seem like he was even in the right place. There was a big play that Denver had, and Troy Franklin, their rookie wide receiver, was open in the end zone. That was miscommunication between Isaiah and Jacorian Bennett. Jacorian Bennett thought he had help on the back end. Isaiah thought he didn't have to help him. Isaiah thought that his assignment was somewhere else. And that goes to lack of communication, and that also goes to guys trying to do too much because they're trying to get it all back. They feel the game slipping away. They're feeling the momentum slip away. They're feeling that, okay, they need a huge play. And I'm not going to lie, as I'm sitting on the couch, I kept thinking, all right, they just need an interception. They need to score defensively. They need to come up with a big play. So I understand why they would think that, but that's okay for us while we're watching the game. We're sitting in the stands. We're sitting on the couch, however we consume it, listening to it on the radio. We could think that, okay, they need one big play. But they have to trust their keys. They have to trust their technique and just stick with doing their job. And that's one of the biggest things. And I'm glad that Ryan sent me that text. And I hadn't really seen that either with the AP-led team where guys all of a sudden got out of the character and started trying to play hero ball. And we've seen that before with Raider teams, offensively and defensively, where they don't really quite trust the guy next to them, so they think that they have to overcompensate. Normally that ends up on the defensive side of things. I want to say that we saw that a lot when Paul Gunther was the defensive coordinator, when he had all kind of different play calls in the book, and guys were confused, but they were also trying to do too much because they didn't know if the guy next to him was going to do their job. So I thought that he brought up a really good point when he said that. So is there a way that Antonio Pierce can get them to, trust each other, get back on the same page? And another part of this element is there's so many injuries, right? I mean, you've got Malcolm Kuntz. He's out for the season. Obviously, he would have been a big-time leader. They lose Christian Wilkins before halftime on Sunday. That's a big-time blow. For a team that already is missing guys. I mentioned their communication. Marcus Epps, I know he's not a guy that shows up on the stat sheet a whole lot. I know he's not a guy that was even a lot of Raider Nation's favorite player, right? Because they just didn't feel like he made enough big plays. But his communication skills were so important, right? Divine Diablo was out. Luke Masterson was out. So now all of a sudden you get a rookie in Tommy Eichenberg playing alongside Robert Spillane at the linebacker position, right? So you can see how all this is a lot of new, a lot of, uncharted territories. Isaiah Palamao on the back end. I like him as a player. Like I said, he's around the ball a lot, but also part of that is communication. So there's all these new parts that are being added to this defense that I mentioned many times that I thought had an opportunity to be elite. Obviously, they're not at that level. What we saw from the Denver Broncos defense, that is what the Raiders defense is supposed to be doing. That's what Antonio Pierce wants that Raiders defense to do, to be suffocating like the Denver Broncos defense was. And once the Denver got up, they knew, there ain't no coming back. We got him. We got him exactly where we want him now. We're going to, unleash those bloodthirsty Pirates along the defensive line to get after the quarterback, and they're going to be in trouble. And, and not to mention, when you flip over on the offensive side of things, the offensive line has struggled, right? Dylan Parham looks like he's still struggling from that Achilles injury. It's not an Achilles tear, obviously, or he wouldn't be playing. But, he's popped up on the injury report the last couple of weeks with a bad Achilles. Also, Colton Miller is still trying to come back from his offseason shoulder surgery that he had. He's still not right where he needs to be. DJ Glaze is a rookie. Jackson Powers-Johnson is a rookie. Andre James, he was a guy that was going to be needed to have a really good game on Sunday versus Denver, and he really didn't. Right? I mean, those guys on the defensive line for Denver really ate up the Raiders' offensive line. So you combine all that, and you see what ended up happening. As soon as Denver smelled blood in the water, they were able to get after the quarterback and really kind of squeeze the life out of the Raiders. And we saw the life. We saw it just leave. We saw it leave their bodies, right? Like as I mentioned on Monday's show, their soul. They lost their soul on Sunday versus the Denver Broncos once they had those vice grips put on them. It was a wrap. Like I said, game, set, match. That's what it is. Now, when it comes to Antonio Pierce, I know a lot of folks have been on him tough and saying he's not the right guy for the job and, he should be fired. And Tom Telesco, you could take him with you, and Luke Getsy. I'll say this. Luke Getsy has a lot to prove. I think that he definitely needs to get more creative with the play calling, right? And of course, Antonio Pierce did hire him as the offensive coordinator, so that's on him. But he is trusting his coaches to do what they're supposed to do, just like he trusts Patrick Graham to coach up the defense. He's allowing his coaches to do what they're doing instead of hovering over them and pushing every button. Now, he has to win games or, he's going to find himself in an unfavorable position. But by no means after 5 games am I thinking that Antonio Pierce is not the right guy for the job. If I was going to pound the table for him to get the job, I'm not going to all of a sudden pound the table for him to get fired after 5 games and a 2-3 record. I'm not going to do that. Now, I know a lot have. A lot of people are saying that he's in over his head. I'm willing to let the season play out. If I was willing to let the season play out with Josh McDaniels and more than a season, right? A season in 8 games that he had? And there's obviously been other coaches that the Raiders have had that, you can question if they're the right guy for the job or not. I'm sure not going to give up on Antonio Pierce after 5 games. And really, to me, it just shows me how quickly, you can lose the room. And when I mean the room, I'm just talking about the fan base, right? The fans are talking about the Raider way, the culture's back. And I do believe that AP has restored that. I think he's made that culture in the locker room pretty healthy. I know this Davante Adams situation is a situation. I don't know if that's a Davante thing, if that's a AP thing, a combination of the two. I don't know how they got sideways. Clearly they got sideways, but it doesn't feel like to me that locker room is sideways with AP. I feel like he has the locker room. He has the pulse of it. Now, if there's ever signs that pop up that he's lost the locker room, then okay, then you have to have some conversations about what you do next, because that's the one thing you can't do. You can't have a head coach there that has lost the locker room. Again, I don't think that AP is that guy. I don't feel like that just being in the locker room, being around the team as much as I am, it doesn't feel like he's lost that. The situation with Davante, I think, is a separate situation where he got sideways. And the Michael Mayer situation I want to bring to the table again is nothing to do with him wanting to trade or him in playing time or not getting enough targets. It truly is a personal situation. And from what my understanding is, what I've been told is that they didn't know what was going on with Big Mike, and then his family had to tell the team about a situation that apparently has occurred in his life before that has put him in a position where he's in. And now that they know what it is, they feel like that they can get to a resolution of it. So I don't know exactly what that means. That's the way that it was worded to me. So it's not he's not looking for a trade. I just saw a lot of people say, oh, Davante and Big Mike are going to be out. That's not the situation at all. And I know the Raiders are working to get him back as quickly as possible, but it truly is a personal situation. And I don't really have anything else to say on it because I can't provide any more clarity. If I do get some, I'll definitely pass it along so you know. But just in case you were wondering, it's not mad at AP, mad at Luke Getsy for not calling his number, him not getting targets. It has nothing to do with that. It truly is a personal situation, and hopefully things work out really well for Big Mike. So that's what I got for you for segment number 2 today's Locked On Raiders podcast. The team continues to try to figure out what went wrong, what they're going to do moving forward. And coming up on Wednesday when we talk to Antonio Pierce, we may get a little bit of clarity as they get back to practice and get ready for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Coming up in segment number 3, your calls and texts. What's on your mind? 707-654-4693. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is Gametime. Gametime is, first of all, it's awesome, but they have a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Most of the time I talk about games like a football game or a basketball game. That season's right around the corner. Hockey's getting started. Baseball's in postseason action. Maybe you're looking for some postseason. Maybe you want to go to the Dodgers game, right, and see what they got cooking, if they got something cooking. Or maybe you're a Padre fan and you'd rather pick their side. Whatever the case may be, Gametime has tickets to anything that you want and everything. Concerts, sporting events, comedy shows, movies, anything that has a ticket, Gametime has you covered. And that's why their Gametime Picks that filters out all the fluff, it shows all the incredible deals on great seats to events that you want, is such a game changer. You have that, boom. You don't waste any time. We talk about time all the time. I hate wasting time. That's my biggest pet peeve. And Gametime will make sure that you don't do that. They also will give you seat views. This is something I talk about all the time, a panoramic view of your seat. So before you click and buy, you exactly know what your seat's going to look like, what your view of the venue is going to look like when you're there. Again, another game changer. Right now, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create the account and the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. It's all one word, LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Game time. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts. You're off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Went a little long there in segment 1 and 2, so I don't have time for too many calls and texts. I apologize for that, but let's go ahead and jump right into it. Let's not waste any more time. Chef Raider, he's up first. He hasn't called in a minute. He has a short, quick call about the Raiders and their win streak versus the Broncos that is now snapped after their loss on Sunday. Here he is, Chef Raider.
Dude, Raider Nation, what's going on? It's your boy, Chef Raider. I ain't called in a minute. But I just wanted to point something out about the game the other day. It's funny. I was just thinking about how we haven't lost to Denver in, 4, almost 5 years, 8 straight. Josh Jacobs undefeated against Denver. No Josh Jacobs. We lose to Denver. It's crazy, right? Anyway, I'm out.
Thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you. And yeah, Josh Jacobs always had big games versus the Broncos, right? I remember I used to ask him about that in the locker room ahead of a Broncos game or even following a Broncos game. What is it about the Denver Broncos? Why do you have so much success? He said, it's a rival. It's a rival game, and I get pumped up for them. They talk a lot of trash, and I want to go after him. He truly was, and obviously he's a Green Bay Packer now, but he truly was, man, a Raider through and through, especially when it came to the rivalries. He took those to heart. I think that has a lot to do with the Alabama in him because they take those rivalries there at the Alabama really personal, and I feel like he does as well, and he did. Again, another reason why he didn't sign with the Kansas City Chiefs, who apparently really wanted him. He decided to take his game to Green Bay and be with the Packers. But you bring up a good point. Now the Raiders are going to have to start another streak against Denver after getting that one snapped on Sunday. But Chef Raider, it's good to hear from you, man. It's been a minute. Thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you. Up next, got a text from Gonzo Raider. This one's pretty quick, or pretty long, I should say. Hey there, Q. Gonzo Raider here from the 505. Well, that sucked. You know, as a 40-plus year Raider fan, unfortunately, we have fell into a custom of losing. We get angry, we get mad, then we get over it and go on being fans to the next one. But this season and the loss to Carolina and how we lost this one is just straight embarrassing. We as fans weekly cheer for the team, travel and spend money to be with the team, buy merchandise to support the team. Even some go hours on end to go full-on costume, Raidered out to celebrate the team and the effort and or lack thereof to finish a game. I personally don't feel is returned. What's that definition of insanity again? I hear that definition in my head each time they try and run the ball. Stop the running. Nothing new. Wrapping up on tackles. Nope. Would rather try and bump with the shoulder. I am no way near any former football coach, but from my spouse, who has no knowledge of the majority of the game, is even questioning why they keep doing this or that. Changes that need to be made. That subjects to do a lot of opinions, but a quarterback is primary. I say go grab Ryan Tannehill to add a true starting veteran quarterback in the room. This merry-go-round of quarterbacks isn't good. O-line getting a smidge better, but still needs help. D-line isn't as elite as we thought, and now with the injuries, what about also grabbing Renfro back? Angry, mad, embarrassed, but tomorrow's a new day and short memory. Steelers up next. Let's go. Raiders all day, every day. Great text right there from Gonzo Raider, and I've done whole shows on that, right? I mean, it's so funny. You being a longtime Raider fan, me being a longtime fan, anyone who's listening to this show, I'm sure, is a longtime Raider fan. And you know what never changes? That. The fact that, you know, we are all in with the Raiders, right? That never changes. What does change? Coaches, coordinators, players, right? You know, partial owners, people come in and buy parts of the team, whatever, right? Locations of where they play, stadiums, right? Facilities, all that stuff changes when it comes to the silver and black. But the one thing that doesn't change is Raider Nation, ever, right? As angry as we can all get, as embarrassed as we can all get, as mad as we can all get because, you know, they didn't get the quarterback or they didn't get this player and they missed on this pick in the draft, whatever the case may be. GMs, they change, right? So many changes go on within an NFL team and within the Raiders. But the one thing that always remains the same is Raider Nation is always here, full throttle, ready to argue with anyone about the Raiders. When you hear someone talking bad, right? It's so funny. It's like talking about an ugly kid, right? You can't call my kid ugly, but I can call my kid ugly, right? I mean, that's just what it is, right? That's what we used to always say about the Coliseum. Yeah, that's an ugly baby, but that's my ugly baby. You can't talk about it because it's ours, right? Well, that's the funny thing about it, and it makes me laugh even thinking about it, right? Because hell, I miss the days at the Coliseum. As great as it is here in Las Vegas, and as much as I enjoy what I do and being at Allegiant Stadium and the Raiders having a state-of-the-art facility, I ain't gonna lie to you. I miss the old rundown Coliseum. I miss the great tailgates in the parking lot, walking across BART. I miss the why in the hell did he just, you know, fall at second base, right? I mean, all the things that happened there, just the love for what it was, right? And look, again, they needed a brand new stadium. I love the stadium here in Las Vegas. I'm not, you know, trying to say that I don't or this, that, and the other, but man, it's just one of those things, right? We go back and we have all these great memories, even when they weren't necessarily great times, but we still could pick out a bunch of great memories. And that's the part that sucks, to your point on your text. Like, everything that we all do is you know, it's the return on investment is not there. And that's why when Max Crosby comes out and says how much he wants to be a Raider, and you heard him in segment number 1, and says, you know, hey, I got this tatted on me. There's nowhere else I want to be, right? That's refreshing to hear from me, just because I know that he has enough pull and he's a great enough player where he can say, you know what, I've given it everything I got. This ain't working. I want to be out. And the team would probably find a way to make that happen. They don't want to lose him, obviously, but they probably would try to do whatever it took to accommodate him because they have respect for him like that, just like they're going to do for Davante, right? But to hear a superstar like that, and he's not a superstar just amongst the Raiders, he's a superstar in the league. To hear a superstar like that just, you know, kind of double and triple down on how much he wants to be a Raider, that's where that makes me feel good. That's the return on investment. And I know it's small. It's not a whole lot, right? It's not wins. It's not winning a championship. It's not any of that. But to hear a superstar like that talk about the team and that he doesn't want to go anywhere, that to me is what makes it all worth it at the end of the day. And, you know, we sit here and we talk about it. We talk how they can do it. Hope they have the right leadership to do it. Hope they have the right players in place to do it. And that's what we do. We hope and we break it down and we talk about what they can do to get where we want to see them, right? Where a lot of us, and, you know, I I have to admit, when they won their last Super Bowl, I wasn't invested in being a Raider fan. I was 83. I was 7. Right? Not even that yet. I didn't turn 7 until November, so I was 6. So clearly I wasn't invested in what they were doing. Right? I was still trying to figure out how to ride my bike without falling off the damn handlebars or falling off and busting my head open. True story. I did that. So there's that, right? So, I mean, it's just kind of is what it is. But this is why, we're fans. This is why we do what we do. Hell, this is why I do a podcast, right? I mean, I didn't do a podcast and say I'm going to be the host of the podcast to make money. I mean, when I started on the Black Hole Banter podcast with James Arcelanes, because we were a couple dudes that looked around and said, the Raiders don't get enough coverage. Let's do a show about them. Let's talk about them. Cool. And it worked out really well. And obviously I've been doing this podcast for quite a while, but it all started with James Arcelanes putting out a tweet saying, hey, I'm thinking about doing a podcast. Someone want to do it with me. I didn't even know who James was. He didn't know who I was. We literally became friends by way of Twitter, and because we had the common interest, which was the Raiders, and let's do a podcast. We're not making no money, right? It actually cost us money to do that show, cost us time, but it was worth it because we were talking about our favorite team. And it's obviously evolved into where it is now at the Locked On Raiders podcast. I'm here in Vegas at Raider Nation Radio 920. So everything has been fantastic from that point of view. Now I just love to see the team pay off everybody and make it worth their time as well. So I think that's a great way to drop the mic. Gonzo Raider, that's a fantastic text. I know it's only one call and one text, but as I mentioned, I went really long in segment 2 and 1. So the show, as you know, is only supposed to be 23 to 28 minutes. And, well, you tell a radio guy to go 23 to 28 minutes and think that that's going to happen. It's not. I do way too much talking all day long. So that's what happens. But we'll be back tomorrow, Raider Nation. We'll continue the journey, right? It's officially week 6. AP will talk on Wednesday. We look forward to that. And we're going to start turning the page and start looking towards the Pittsburgh Steelers, who, they got a couple of game losing streak, and they've got a really tough defense that's going to be coming to Allegiant Stadium. So we'll start to turn the page and look forward to them as well. So until tomorrow, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.